Malik had been sweeping the oil-stained floors of Dwayne's auto garage for almost 6 years. Most of the mechanics barely noticed him. To them, he was just the janitor, the guy who emptied trash bins, wiped counters, and mopped up spills at closing time. No one asked where he came from or what he used to do. He kept to himself, always quiet, always on time, always watching. But what they didn't know was that Malik watched everything. Every spark plug changed, every bolt torqued, every argument over diagnostics. He observed it all. When a mechanic cursed at a seized caliper, Malik took mental notes. When someone struggled with a misfiring cylinder, he listened closely. He learned more than anyone suspected, because no one thought he was paying attention. Every night, after the last wrench hit the toolbox and the bay doors shut, Malik stayed behind under the guise of cleaning up. But instead of just wiping down workbenches, he flipped open abandoned repair manuals and studied them like scripture. He taught himself systems, sensors, and schematics. He borrowed knowledge from overheard conversations and broken parts lying in scrap bins. It wasn't formal training, but it was real. And it stuck. Then, one sweltering Monday afternoon, everything changed. A brand-new Dodge Challenger Hellcat rolled into the garage, growling like a wounded beast. Its owner, a sharp-dressed executive with a Bluetooth earpiece and zero car knowledge, explained it had suddenly lost power and started flashing error codes. The shop's head mechanic, Darnell, popped the hood and grimaced. It was a mess. Fried. Supercharger, erratic sensor readings, a nightmare of electronics. "This thing's toast," he muttered. As the crew gathered around the engine bay tossing around theories, Malik stood nearby with his mop bucket, listening intently. He recognized the sound the Hellcat made when it pulled in: hesitant throttle, uneven boost. He'd heard it before. Slowly, almost unintentionally, he muttered, "Could be the bypass valve. Maybe the actuator's jammed." Silence fell. The mechanics turned, eyebrows raised. "What was that?" Darnell asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Malik hesitated. "I said, the bypass valve might be stuck open, could be messing with the boost cycle." Darnell chuckled, not kindly. "And you're the janitor, right?" A few of the guys laughed. One snorted. Malik stood his ground. "I could fix it," he said quietly. That stopped everyone. Darnell stepped closer. "You saying you could fix this car?" Malik nodded. "If you let me try." A slow grin crept across Darnell's face. "Fine, you get one night. Fix it, and I'll personally sign you up for a real mechanics test. Fail, and you don't say another word about engines. Ever." Malik agreed. That night, when the garage emptied out and silence took over, he grabbed a socket set, wiped his hands, and looked under the hood. The Hellcat sat there like a wounded animal, daring him to try. And for the first time, no one was watching, except the car. The garage was silent except for the ticking sound of cooling metal and the soft buzz of a lone fluorescent light above the workbench. Malik stood in front of the Challenger Hellcat, its massive hood still lifted like a gate to a forbidden kingdom. The smell of burnt rubber and warm coolant lingered in the air. He exhaled slowly, rolled up his sleeves, and whispered to himself, "Let's dance." He didn't hesitate. First, he disconnected the battery. Safety first. Then he laid out the tools he had quietly memorized over the years: a torque wrench, ratchet set, OBD scanner, multimeter. Not bad for a janitor, he thought. He had no fancy toolbox, no name patch stitched on his shirt, but what he had was focus, and hands that had learned by feel rather than instruction. He started with diagnostics. The Hellcat's onboard system was throwing 6 error codes. Half were garbage, triggered by the domino effect of the main fault. But 2 stood out, one pointing to a throttle body malfunction and the other to the bypass valve actuator. Bingo! Malik knew that if the actuator was stuck, it would prevent the supercharger from pressurizing air properly, choking performance. He disconnected the intake piping and peered inside the system, inspecting the actuator linkage with a small flashlight. It was barely moving. Grit buildup, maybe, or a worn-out solenoid. Either way, it was jammed. Most guys would have replaced the entire unit, but Malik had a different approach. Carefully, he removed the actuator assembly and placed it on the bench. Piece by piece, he cleaned, polished, and inspected the internals. No rush, no panic. He repinned a loose connector, relubed the actuator shaft, and manually tested the motor using jumper wires. It spun freely. His hands moved with calm confidence, the kind of confidence that doesn't shout. It just works. Midway through the night, a pair of headlights flashed through the garage window. A car slowed down outside, paused, then moved on. Probably Darnell, checking if he'd given up yet. But Malik wasn't going anywhere. By 3 a.m., he had everything reassembled, wiring secured, connectors cleaned, actuator recalibrated manually. No dealer tools, just knowledge and grit. He reconnected the battery and slid into the driver's seat. For a second, he just sat there. The interior still smelled like new, leather and ambition. He turned the key. The engine roared to life. Not a cough, not a stutter. Smooth, powerful, clean. He gave the throttle a gentle tap. Instant response. He grinned. Then, just to be sure, he connected the OBD scanner one. More time. 0 error codes. Boost levels stable. Throttle behavior normal. The bypass valve working perfectly. Malik stepped out of the car, wiped his hands on a rag, and leaned against the fender. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the sky outside was softening to a dull gray. He had done it. The janitor had just fixed the beast no one else dared touch, and morning was only minutes away. By 7:30 a.m., the crew began filtering into the garage, yawning and slurping coffee, their eyes still heavy from sleep. Most didn't even notice Malik at first. He stood quietly near the Hellcat, arms crossed, face calm, like a sentry guarding a secret. But Darnell saw him, and the look on Malik's face was not one of failure. Darnell approached with a smirk, expecting to find an engine in pieces, a defeated janitor, and the need to call in a tow truck. Instead, he found the Challenger reassembled, polished, and humming softly as Malik turned the key and let the 6.2-liter V8 idle like a satisfied lion. "You didn't," Darnell muttered, eyes narrowing. Malik said nothing. He just stepped aside and handed Darnell the scanner. One quick check, and the color drained from Darnell's face. No error codes. Throttle response? Perfect. Boost pressure. Back to factory specs. The bypass actuator, the very part the mechanics had argued about for hours the day before, was functioning like it had just rolled off the production line. The other techs noticed the commotion and gathered around. Some stared at the scanner, some peeked under the hood, and a few simply stood in stunned silence, blinking at Malik like he was an illusion. "You fixed it?" one of them finally asked. "Last night," Malik replied simply. "You cleaned." "The actuator?" Darnell asked, still in disbelief. "You recalibrated the whole system without factory software?" "I used jumper wires and logic," Malik said. "The problem wasn't the hardware. It was a dirty sensor and a weak ground." The room went silent again. That level of diagnostic work wasn't something even certified techs pulled off on the first try. "I thought you were just the janitor," someone whispered. Malik looked up. "I am, but that doesn't mean I don't know engines." Darnell was quiet for a long moment, then reached into his shirt pocket, pulled out a folded application form, and handed it to Malik. "You want a spot on the team?" he asked. "That bet wasn't a joke. You just earned yourself a trial. Full pay, Full respect." Malik accepted the form without a word. He didn't gloat, didn't smile wide, just a slow nod. Word of what had happened spread fast. By lunch, the garage's regulars had heard about the janitor who fixed the Hellcat, and by evening the shop had 3 new appointments, all owners who wanted the quiet guy to take a look at their tricky engine problems. Some mechanics were still skeptical. Some weren't too happy. But even they had to admit, Malik had pulled off something they hadn't, with no training, no certificate, just raw knowledge, observation, and heart. From that day forward, Malik didn't carry a mop. He carried a wrench. The next few weeks turned the garage upside down. Malik wasn't just the janitor anymore. He was the guy who fixed the Hellcat. Customers who used to breeze past him now shook his hand. Some even asked for him by name, walking past the certified techs to speak with the man who had, somehow, done the impossible. But the real test wasn't customer praise. It was earning the respect of the other mechanics. Darnell kept his word. Malik was added to the team as an apprentice tech, though it didn't take long for everyone to see that apprentice was just a formality. His methods were unconventional. He didn't always follow the step-by-step processes taught in school. But what he had was an uncanny ability to read engines like people read faces. He listened, watched, and felt for problems others overlooked. One day, a customer brought in a battered BMW 7 Series with a persistent electrical ghost. Lights flickering, random shutdowns, a parasitic drain no one could trace. 3 techs had already taken a shot at it, hours wasted. Still no solution. Malik asked for 30 minutes. He regrounded the wire, resealed the trunk, and told the front desk it was ready. Problem solved. In 27 minutes. Whispers started traveling through town. People said the new guy at Dwayne's could talk to cars. Some even called him a car whisperer. One mechanic, Jackson, didn't like that. He'd been there 7 years and didn't appreciate being shown up by a former janitor. "He's just lucky," Jackson scoffed one morning. "These little wins won't last." But Darnell wasn't buying that. He'd seen too much. He began pairing Malik with the toughest cases, using him as a secret weapon. No one else could diagnose a bad throttle sensor just by listening to how a car idled. No one else could rebuild a turbo actuator from junkyard parts and make it hum like new. Then came the big test. A client with a Maserati Quattroporte that wouldn't start, and Maserati's own dealership couldn't explain why. Darnell gave Malik the keys. Malik spent 2 hours under the hood, studying the ECM, checking grounds, tracing relays, and referencing what he'd read online years ago about CAN bus interference. Finally, he reprogrammed a corrupted gateway module using a borrowed scan tool. The Maserati roared to life. It was no longer luck. It was skill. Pure, practiced skill. And now, even Jackson was quiet. The garage had changed. Malik wasn't just a fluke. He was becoming a legend, right there on those same oil-stained floors he used to mop in silence. A year passed. Malik no longer wore the dark blue janitor's coveralls. Now he sported a crisp black technician's uniform with his name embroidered, in red thread, Malik A., beneath the company logo. He had his own workstation, his own rolling toolbox, and a desk in the back with a laptop constantly running diagnostics. The mop and broom. They stood untouched in the corner, a quiet monument to where he'd started. The garage had grown busier too. Word of mouth had become wildfire. Customers traveled from 2-3 towns over just to get Malik to look at their cars. Some brought older vehicles, some high-end imports, and a few even showed up with classics that other shops refused to touch. To all of them, Malik brought the same quiet attention and respect. He didn't brag. He didn't rush. He just fixed. One afternoon, a local news crew showed up, tipped off by a customer whose Rolls-Royce Malik had brought back from the dead. They asked for an interview. Malik hesitated but agreed, standing beside the Hellcat, the same car that started it all. On camera, they asked him how a janitor became the garage's top technician. "I was never trying to prove anyone wrong," Malik said simply. "I was just waiting for someone to give me a chance to prove myself right." The video went viral. Soon, Malik was invited to speak at vocational schools, career fairs, and even AutoTech expos. He didn't speak like a professor. He spoke like someone who knew the struggle of being overlooked, ignored, misjudged. Students loved him because he made genius seem reachable. He showed them that understanding machines wasn't about being born with a gift. It was about time, patience, and believing in yourself when nobody else does. Darnell, the same man who had once laughed at Malik's bet, now introduced him at every event as the best damn wrench I've ever worked with. They became not just co-workers, but close friends, and, eventually, business partners. 2 years later, they opened a second garage together, M&D Performance Works. Malik designed the diagnostic bay himself, clean, efficient, lined with tools, and computers. But above the main door, in bold silver letters, was a quote. "It's not the title that makes the mechanic. It's the hands." He never forgot where he came from. Once a month, Malik still swept the garage floors, not because he had to, but because he wanted to remember. And when the younger apprentices came to him with questions, he never turned them away. He stayed late, he listened, he taught. Because once upon a time, all he had was a mop, a mind full of untested knowledge, and a bet. And from that bet rose a legend, a janitor who fixed the unfixable, a mechanic who never needed a title to prove his worth, a man who reminded the world that greatness doesn't always enter with applause. Sometimes it walks in quietly, with a wrench in one hand and a dream in the other.